This is Your Own Best Company, a podcast for people who love to work alone. Good day, good morning, good evening, whatever it is where you are. I am Franklin Taggart, and this is Your Own Best Company, a podcast for people who love working alone. And today is going to feature one last reel of highlights from season 1 of the podcast. This has been a very good starting year for this show and for me. And I've had the pleasure of talking with over 40 remarkable guests, and you're going to hear from some more of them today. The theme for today's highlights is personal development, and each one of the guests that I've had has had something to say about their own personal development that I think would be really helpful for others to hear. So this is going to be some of the highlights from personal development insights from the first year of Your Own Best Company. We're going to get started with a visit with Eli Hans. And Eli is a multi-talented individual living in beautiful central Mexico with his husband, Joseph Bennett. And Eli had a lot to say about passion and purpose in your work and in your life. He's most recently produced a almost one-man show, and it's a musical called Out of the Blue. And you can find more information about Eli at outoftheblueshow.com.
First of all, let me just say, let's all pray and know that you don't have to have a horrible disease confronting your death in order to make this shift, okay?
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
Yeah. It happens to a lot of people, but we're not saying go get a disease so you can change your life. Yeah. Hopefully we can avoid that in life, right? But honestly, in the state of the world, with the state of the world, there is nothing that I can think of that is more important than doing something that makes a difference in the world. Yeah. Through using our natural skills and abilities and our natural gifts that God gave us.
Yeah.
That's why, honestly, that's why we're here. And it's like, I know a lot of people say, well, I don't know what my purpose in life is. Why am I here? Why am I here? And they're all so confused about it. And I'm thinking, well, it's clear why you're here.
Yeah.
You're here to fully express who you are, to make a difference in the world somehow, in your own way. That's it. Just keep breathing and doing that. And I got really, really clear through my experience with cancer that that's really what I'm supposed to be doing. Yeah. So it was a big kick in the butt to get me right back on the path that I was meant to be on, that my self-doubt and my constant questioning and doubting, who am I? Oh, I'm not good enough. Or who am I to do that? Those questions took me right off the path.
Yeah.
Invisibly, because, those kinds of questions are usually invisible. We're not aware that we're thinking them. And all of a sudden, why am I here? Why am I almost dying? Or why am I in this job I hate?
Yeah.
Because we haven't been honoring the true voice inside us.
My next highlight features Yifat Cohen. Yifat is a high-energy entrepreneur who lives in Austin, Texas. She's also an avid practitioner of the martial art Krav Maga. And she had a lot to say about 3 levels of trust in marketing. I hope you'll enjoy what she had to say about it. You can find out more about Yifat at yifatcohen.com.
The difference is, I think marketers, you know that saying, like, something is fantastic until marketers come in and kind of mess it up, right? Clubhouse was great, and then marketers like, hey, I can monetize this. And I think, the internet has matured to the point where, like, we know what a webinar is.
Yeah.
We know it's a sales page. We know that if I'm going to give you my email, it's going to be marketing, right? And in the last 2 years with COVID, we just lost trust in everything we see online. Do I wear a mask? Do I not wear a mask? Do I get a vaccine? Do I not get a vaccine? Right? Like, what's happening? The world is exploding. The world is safe. We don't know. And you don't even know, like, am I reading this and is that the right, is that science and data, or is it, manipulated? We have no idea. And so we just don't trust anybody. And we might be willing to part with $10, $20, $30, right? But for high ticket, you have to build that trust. And that trust has been built with emails and follow-ups and 21 touch points and have them see your posts and everything. It's not enough anymore because we just don't believe anything. And so you have these 3 levels of trust that I always talk about. It's kind of like a house with 3 legs, right? First one, you have to trust that I know what I'm talking about, right? I'm really the expert and I'm not full of, manure. So the first one is like, yeah, she's the real deal and she's not just coming here and she's going to run away with my wallet. Yeah. So that's most of the time when people come into your world, they probably trust you with that because otherwise they won't give you their email or anything else. The second one is I have to trust that you'll deliver, right? You won't run away with my wallet. So I have to trust you as an expert, and then I have to trust your character that you're safe. And then I have to trust myself because I've tried many times and never worked for me, right? I have so many people that come like that with like, yeah, it works for nothing ever works for me, right? And they bought programs and they worked with coaches and they invested, right? And nothing happened. And it doesn't happen. Sometimes it's because of the person. They're not action takers, right? They're not battery included type of people. But for the battery included type of people, they might have seen, it's a funny metaphor, but they might have seen like, they wanted to wake up, they want a 6-pack. And they go online and they see an ad, buy this and you're gonna wake up with a 6-pack. And they're like, okay. And they buy it, and then they go to sleep, and they wake up, and there's no 6-pack. And then they go online to be like, oh, where's my 6-pack? But all they see is like, everybody else has a 6-pack. And so they're going like, okay, well, I have, the muffin top body.
I have a keg.
I just need to get to learn to love my curves, right? Right? And so then you come in and you go like, here's a pack. Just so you know you can do it. Let's just develop the pack for free, right? Here it is. And you go like, oh, holy crap, my body can do this, right? You want the next 5? Let's do this together, right? Like I'll keep supporting you together. So it's kind of like delight for free and then continue delight. That's what you pay for. And that's what's missing. People are missing that experience of going like, I can have a 6-pack. Here's the first one, right? Yeah. And if you do that in public, right? Like, hey, I'm going to help Franklin now get a pack, right? And here's how I'm doing it, right? And everybody's saying this and they go like, can I get one? Can I get one? I'm like, sure, jump on and, I'll help you. Now I take that moment and I turn that into content.
Okay.
So it's not like I have to sit down and go like, what am I going to write about today that's actually going to convince them that I can do a 6-pack for them, not just for me, right? How am I going to, what video do I need to create? What image, what quote, blah, blah, blah. Instead, you do that, you take that and you go like, here's a pack, here's a pack, here's a quote from a pack, here's what someone said, not for me, it's just the whole thing. And so you completely remove the slaving over content creation. Yeah. Right? You take that moment, repurpose it, keep delivering moments, and what do you know? Before you know it, everybody goes like, hey, you want a pack? Go to that guy, because everything I see online, he helps people get that.
Because everybody knows, right?
Everybody knows, and that's your name, right? And now you don't have to say what you do because everybody knows what you do. And when they're in private and they go like, hey man, I really want a 6-pack. Go talk to Franklin. I saw he deliver 5 6-packs to 5 people, right? Yeah. And he does it for free. Go talk to him, try it. That's it. Here's your entire inbound marketing thing. All you do is you really help people. And then you take that moment of help, that jackpot moment, and you give it to, and you show everybody else that that's what you do.
that it works. The next guest I'd like to feature is Regan Espinoza. Regan is someone that I've known for a few years, and I always marvel at how quickly she can take a creative idea and turn it into something tangible, just in a short time. She's written 6 or 7 books by now, and a couple of years ago, after her dad died, she had an idea for something called the Visit Box. And the Visit Box is a memorial box that gets placed at grave sites. If you want to know more information about that, you can visit Regan's website, thevisitbox.com. You also can find Regan on her author page on Amazon.com. And Regan Espinoza is going to be talking a little bit about how she works through criticism from friends and family when she has these bold ideas. Humans are judgmental. And what's really interesting to me is that a lot of times it sounds like to me that you actually bring your ideas out and you make them into something before anybody else's judgment can even begin to have an impact on you. You're so quick about it. It's like, the books that you had, any kind of judgment that happened after the fact. Right? So
I'm going to beat you to the punch.
So the question that I have is, like, how sensitive are you to the judgmental side of humans when it comes to the ideas and the products that you've created?
Well, just to disclose, and not something I'm ashamed of, but I have a history of mental illness. So I'm very sensitive. I'm very anxious. I have depression. And so I heard a pastor say that your thorn is your mentor. So you learn from something that you feel like is a challenge or a struggle.
Yeah.
And I feel like I have that, and it can drive me. So I can show I can be my worst enemy. And so I'm going to prove it to myself first. And when it's out there, it is still hard. It is still hard to hear comments that you would not expect from people that know you. You know them. So you're expecting to hear some really positive things. But I think somebody said, as you get, like, I'm not considered myself at the top, but once you try to grow, it gets lonely, if you're going to go into new territory, it's like, oh, now what's Regan doing now? Kind of thing. And so you're the joke at the Thanksgiving dinner and stuff. And you just have to understand that is not I have to tell myself, I was born here for a reason. And so they are not going to get it. They didn't wake up in the middle of the night. I did, And the one thing I will say that helps me as I drive and see patients right now, is I think people have, I'm not into numerology or anything like that. People have certain signs that they look at from the universe or God. And mine is, when I see number 17, and that is just a reminder, if it's license plates or whatever, it's a reminder of the day I was born. So I was born on the 17th. And so when I see it, I'm like, okay, yeah, that person doesn't get it, but I know that there's still something here. That was, a small step, I don't know, towards something.
Yeah.
And my father had died on the 18th, and I cringe at that when that date comes. I have a hard time, and I disclose it on Facebook and worry that you're sharing too much. But when the 18th comes, I'm so worried, but I'm so grateful for the 17th, because that's the day before he died. Yeah. And it reminds me, you're still here, and it's okay when people don't get it, because that just means that was not for them. And I had to really toughen my skin from my friends and my family. The more strangers I talked to about it, there's a lot of acceptance. And I think that was, that's what, if anything, that's what the Walking Dead devotional did for me.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't the cookie cutter Christian book. And so it was like, what are you doing? We don't want to talk about that, apocalypse, but no, that's okay. So anyway, I think that friends and family, it was a little harder, but I knew where they were coming from. Past employer, I thought talking about entrepreneur stuff and, owning your own business and the products and, some people are just not at that path. And I definitely wasn't 15 years ago.
My guest, Larry Kaul, has been a self-employed entrepreneur for over 30 years, and he now coaches other entrepreneurs, helping them to get their revenue to a higher place in a shorter amount of time. And one of the things that he talks about is the importance of having really good systems. In this excerpt, he talks a little bit about the system that he's developed to help him stay on task and focused in the midst of all of the temptations of shiny object syndrome and other addictions, as he calls them, to distractions. So here's Larry Kaul. You can find him at revenueclimber.com. Can you talk a little bit about how did you come to the point of understanding the importance of really good systems in your business?
It came out of necessity. I'd learned in my other business that I wasn't a very good manager or leader, that I was a good visionary, and I was good at making things happen and building things, but I wasn't a particularly good leader of other people.
Yeah.
And I have this story that really tells me what that looks like, which is this idea of, I see something awesome up north. So I'm a shiny object chaser. So I see a shiny object up north. I'm like, oh, we got to go up there. And I look at everybody, I was like, come on, let's go. And I go running north and they're like, what does he want? And somebody's like, well, he wants us to go up there. Why? I don't know. And then they come running up north and I get up there and I'm like, that's not so great. And I look down and and I go south. And then I'm like, well, where are you all? Where are you guys? I'm south and they're up north and they're looking down and they're like, you said to come up here. And I said, yeah, but I changed my mind. And they said, well, you didn't tell us. So extrapolate that into a total chaotic mess, which was how I used to work. So that's one thing. Shiny object chasing's got to stop. The second thing, now you can write down the excitement. So I have a column in my Trello of, oh, cool thing up north, write it down. And it goes into a process. The second thing that I think is really was a big revelation for me was to break what I call addiction. Addiction to alcohol, addiction to drugs, it's not really that big a deal for a lot of people that I know. Maybe they're in recovery or something, but what is a big deal is addiction to other people's priorities, addiction to devices, addiction to instant gratification, addiction to not having fear, wanting to be in a state of happiness all the time. Those are addictions. And I think breaking those addiction cycles with a mindset practice was a big win for me. Which involves tough things like getting up really early in the morning.
Yeah.
And that's how I did it. Now, people have their own ways of doing these things, but you have to have some mindset practice to keep yourself kind of on track. The third thing is just a workable system based on using a calendar, the way it's designed to be used. And I make appointments. There is not a minute out of the day that's not scheduled. And it sounds horrible. And I remember thinking, how could I possibly ever do that? Well, I couldn't with other people's systems.
Yes.
So I read all those books, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I was like, I can't do any of this stuff. And then the time blocking, and I'm like, I can't do any of this stuff. And then I watched myself not be able to do it. And I started to recognize what I could do. And I built that system that I could use.
Yeah.
And then I felt this incredible surge of freedom from being able to have that and to work within it. And what I did was I built a lot of flexibility into it.
Karen Diffy is a coach to introvert leaders, and she is an introvert herself and was involved in corporate life for many, many years before leaving that to become the coach that she is today. And she is based in Wales and is doing some amazing work in helping introvert leaders discover their strengths and to be able to articulate those in ways that other people can understand. So here's Karen Diffy. If you'd like more information about Karen, you can find it at ksdcoach.com.
But many introverts do hold back.
I do.
And do keep their superpowers to themselves, or they don't share fully their superpowers. And that's a great shame, because they have so much to offer. And sometimes it's just that they don't know how to articulate that either. Or they don't have the opportunity, say, for example, in the meeting, and there may be more extroverts there, and they just don't feel comfortable voicing the things that they have to share. And just because you're the loudest voice in the room doesn't mean to say that you come up with the best ideas. And that's why I always encourage extrovert leaders to give introverts that opportunity to share their wealth of knowledge and experience, because they have so many great ideas, but they're not the front of the queue usually to share them.
From the description of your coaching, Karen, it sounds like that's something that you spend a significant time doing with folks, is helping them to articulate that and helping them to come out of their shell a little bit and to express that more. I mean,
Absolutely.
That's the purpose of this whole exercise, but I can't imagine that your clients, they have to benefit from this. They just have to.
They certainly do. And it's about finding that space where they feel comfortable stretching enough to step out of their comfort zone, but they don't go into the panic and feel completely overwhelmed. And it's about helping them to find their own solutions so that they can make that happen and their voice is heard. And that can just make such a big difference to them in progressing their career, and also personally, just being able to have that confidence to share what they know, because they have a wealth of knowledge and experience, and sometimes they just don't know how to share that.
I asked my good friend, Dr. Joanie Connell, to come on the podcast a couple of times in the first season. The first one, we were just going through and talking about all of the different assessments that are available to help people understand themselves and each other, and to find their different strengths and weaknesses and challenges, etc., etc. In this particular excerpt, Joanie's talking about how these assessments really are designed to be used, and how they're often sometimes misused. You can get in touch with Joanie at flexibleworksolutions.com. What are the ways that you see people using these kinds of assessments, both appropriately and inappropriately?
Oh, that's a really good example, Franklin, because, something like the Myers-Briggs is not to be used for selection and doesn't have the reliability and validity to predict if somebody will be successful at a job. But it does have great utility in terms of interacting with people. But I think the point you're trying to make is that if somebody just hands you a test and tells you something and maybe gives you some information based on it, that maybe you're not taking it in the way that it's meant to be used. And so the Myers-Briggs is really meant to be used as a way to as I said before, interact with people and understand that you might need to shift your way of communicating with others depending on what other people are looking for. And it's also, I mean, when you have these 4 boxes, it can be a little bit maybe sort of black and white where there is more gradation there, like introversion, extroversion. Actually, if you look psychologically, is not a single dimension. You can have both. Okay. And so when you're either I or E on the Myers-Briggs, it's not really an accurate assessment. It's one to help people communicate and understand each other better. But for example, I'm right in the middle.
Yeah.
I'm right in the middle of both. And so I can present as either. And it's confusing when you're sort of overlapping. You're on the fence. You don't really know. And it can be confusing to others too, because the one time they see you acting one way and they expect you to act a different way. But it's meant to just start the dialogue and talking about that, not necessarily to use the results and stick to them. It's meant to say, okay, well, where do you fit on here? Oh, okay. Well, why? And how do you like to talk to people? How do you like people to approach you? And when you're at work, you have a team member. Do you like the big picture? Are you a detailed person? Do you like to go out and do lunch all the time? Or would you rather stick to your office? And, if you don't want to go out, then I'm not going to take it personally. You don't like me. I'm just realizing, oh, that's just kind of who you are, but it's meant to initiate those kind of conversations, not prescribe people. And it's certainly not meant to make decisions on where people should work.
I mentioned Joseph Bennett earlier in the program when I was connecting him with Eli Hans, who is his husband. The two of them are both Renaissance men as far as I'm concerned. They share a space in central Mexico, and they host retreats at their home in a very quiet and gorgeous and wonderful space for people who just need to come in and recharge, or if they need to come in and focus, or if they need to come in and write, the space is available to them. Joseph this year has written, I think, 3 books. And in this particular excerpt, he's talking about one of his books, which is on the topic of rest. I've heard a recent trend in the entrepreneurial world, at least, that people are getting really burned out on hustle. And, that the whole mentality that you just have to be on all the time. And in the interview that I heard that you did with Meredith on LinkedIn, there were a couple of things that you were talking about, that it doesn't have to be really difficult to integrate rest into our lives. We just have to be intentional about it and do it. You gave some ideas. Can you talk a little bit about what are some practical ways that people can become more restful?
Thank you. The one thing that we can do so easily is to open up our Google Calendar and schedule it. We just look at, from 12 to 2, I'm not doing anything except daydreaming, or I'm just staring into space, or I'm looking at the walls, or I'm laying down. And the second part that comes with that is, what do you do with the guilt?
Yeah.
Right? Because we're going to feel guilty, especially if our bank account isn't where we want it to be, or our children are asking for something, or the dog needs to be picked up at the vet, or the daffodils need to be planted. What do you do with the guilt?
Yeah.
And that's really huge. And I want to honor that. I want to honor that we do feel guilty until now when we are trying to take care of ourselves. And I write in the book that taking care of ourselves has become a revolutionary act. And then in the next sentence, I'm like, what the fudge? How did self-care become a revolutionary act? We could begin from a place of self-care. So that's the invitation. And the book is mostly a workbook. So there's a lot of space for journaling and a lot of space for resting.
Yeah.
And just contemplating, how can we show up to our lives more fully without beating ourselves up over it?
Heather Chavin is the founder and CEO of Go Done, which is an online co-working community that is growing and growing and growing, and gives people an online mechanism for interaction, accountability, and more support for business, especially for people who are solopreneurs, freelancers, and other folks who work alone. If you want more information about what Heather's up to, go to gogodone.com. And in this excerpt, Heather is talking about the challenge of staying focused and on task. Do you have a sense of what it was within you that made staying on task and seeing things through? What were the things that made that challenging?
I think that if you look at our brains, our lizard brain, our old brain, the really powerful brain, the decision maker, right, our ancient brains are all about the lowest levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So, air, water, shelter, companionship, and all of those kinds of things. And I think those things were just overriding, like low energy. It doesn't want you to expend too much energy because we got to save it from running away from a predator or whatever. So my kind of old brain was just like, no, we're going to conserve energy. We're not going to do things. And until there's a reason to push me into motion, which would be acceptance in my community or the thoughts of others. And so it's not that my entire self-value, hinges on the thoughts of others, but a big portion of my self-value hinges on the thoughts that other people have of me, of specific people, right? Like if my mom is disappointed in me, I care about that. And my happiness is impacted. If some random person on Twitter thinks I'm a dork, don't care.
Right.
So you can't say, I don't care. You can't care what other people think about you. There's, we're humans. We live in relation with others. And that's a really powerful motivator for me. And I think so many of us are obligers because it's good for the species, for us to be in service to others. And it feels good to be in service to others. But when you have your own passions that you don't seem to be able to follow, even when those passions ultimately are to be in service to others, but there's the building blocks, it's just the system's not working. It's just not working that way. Yeah. And then if you're stressed out and if you're quote unquote busy and all of those other things that get in our way, if I think at 5 p.m. I'm going to do anything, my willpower is like tanked. It's gone. There's nothing left. And I might be incredibly passionate about something, and it might be an idea I'm in love with and something I care about very deeply. When the tank's empty, and you can't gut it out. You need something else to, willpower isn't exactly a muscle, but it will run down. And then you need to fire it up in other ways, because it's, if I think I'm tired and then somebody says, I'll give you $1 million to run 5 miles, I'm going to run the 5 miles. Right. But if nobody offers me the $1 million, I'm going to stay on the couch. Right. Yeah. So we can find other ways to trigger that willpower and to get going. And so I've done a ton of exploration in how to make that work for me, and then shared it with others in building my online community. Not for everyone, but for a lot of us obligers. And interestingly enough, if you're a Gretchen Rubin fan and the 4 tendencies, if you're a rebel, it's a really nice space as well. We have quite a few rebels.
My guest, Alan Heyman, is an executive coach living in the Washington, D.C. area, and he has a history in the broadcast industry. He was actually a reporter and a broadcast reporter for a few years back in his early career. He's currently working primarily with executives who tend to be on the introverted side, and he helps them to step into their leadership roles a little bit more assertively. In this particular excerpt, he is talking about the propensity that introverts have for sensory overload, how he recognizes it, and how he finds ways to take care of himself in those situations. You can find Alan at peacefuldirections.com. The way that I've talked to people about it is that I talk to them more about sensory stimulation being the thing that I need to be more aware of than even interaction is concerned. Because it's not so much the people that drain me, it's being in situations where my senses are overloaded. And that's where I really feel it. I don't know, do you find a similarity there?
I do in some ways, and it is very context dependent. So I love live music. I know you're a musician. And being in a live musical environment that's loud and full of people, and just, that is a lot on the senses, but that also gives me life. Last weekend, I was in a grocery store that was more crowded than it typically is for a Saturday afternoon, and I had my wife and daughter both with me, which was unusual. Usually it's just one or the other. And I got to a point where, they're bringing items to my, should we get this? Should we get that? It's not on the list. I got to follow my list, and there's all these people, and it was too much. And so I kind of realized my cup was full at that point, and it was getting to be about time to leave the store before we had some sort of a bigger issue. So we got to the car. I was able to, take some breaths and kind of come back to myself, and it was fine for the rest of the afternoon. But my senses were definitely pushing toward overload, and the warning signs were definitely there.
What are the warning signs for you?
I find myself having a very heightened state of awareness that I can't quite turn off.
Yeah.
I find myself unable to be rational as I typically am. I'm a rather rational person, in the sense that if I'm trying to choose between two different kinds of peanut butter in that moment, the brain can't process it. And that is a sign, because that's the sort of thing that I usually have no trouble with at all.
LeAndra Foster was here talking about money. And one of the things that she brought up in her interview was this fantastic concept of replacing the vow of poverty with the vow of wealth, and how it has changed her thinking. And as a result of changing her thinking, other things have changed as well. If you want to know more about the programs that LeAndra offers, she offers a Linktree link, linktr.ee/ElanLife, and that's ELANLYFE. Here's LeAndra Foster. Now, we opened up this conversation talking about the realization that you had a couple of years ago, where you just said, the numbers show that we're actually millionaires now. We've crossed the 7-figure mark.
Yes.
And yet we're still living as if. And so what has changed since then?
So in the allowing, so I said this vow of poverty. Then Amanda, she's always good at the new ideas. She's like, well, what about the flip of that? Like, what if you divorced yourself from the vow of poverty and you took instead a vow of wealth? And I think that's essentially what has happened. So my goals have changed. And like, I purposely, so my clients, I think might have wanted to hang me from a tree. In December, I had them graph their last 4 years of business revenue and what they wanted their 5-year goal to be. And I was like, okay, map in between how you're going to get there. And then I caught myself and I thought, I'm playing small. And I thought, what if I made my 5-year goal this year's goal? And that's really triggering.
Yeah. Hello. What if I made this year's goal my monthly goal, right?
Yeah, exactly. That'll probably be the next game once I meet this one. But but that, honestly, that's a lot of what I do is like I try to find my trigger points and I try to find my clients' trigger points because that's how you clear them. So I had them play that game and it did. It made a lot of them, no. And the thing is, you have to think differently to get to the next level. And so how have I gone from, well, we're millionaires, but we don't feel like it. Our cash flow hasn't changed per se in the last year, but the way I think has changed. And the way that I think is going to change my cash flow, because now that I'm thinking about this 5-year goal as this year's goal, it's who do I have to be to meet that goal? And it brings up a lot of beliefs that like, oh, that's too much, or what will people think, or, all the crap. And one of them you'll like this because you were asking me earlier. One of them that I finally got to the root was, if I don't need to make money, what will my purpose be?
The last guest that I'm going to feature in this reel is my friend Audrey Holst. And Audrey was so compelling that I had to have her come back twice. Her first visit, she was talking a lot about perfectionism and some of the drivers behind perfectionism and how they are just legitimate human needs for belonging and for survival and things like that. In this particular excerpt, we were talking a lot about social media and how it influences our perceptions. And she had a lot of interesting things to say about that. To get in touch with Audrey, check out fortitudeandflow.com.
One of the main things, right? One of the main tenets I found with perfectionism and perfectionists is we are caring people, like really caring, big hearts, big ideas, big visions. Like we are like a very important aspect of society. Like, let's just put it like we are very important. We've got some great stuff going on here. So the thing that's interesting, okay, so let's rewind just a second, because I think we need a little bit of background, right?
Sure.
So if you think about yourself as an animal, right? So even as your listeners, as I'm talking, if you can kind of imagine this, right? Take technology just out of the equation for a second, right? We are walking around, we are taking in our environment, we're looking around, we see the physical world, we're connected with our physical bodies because this is how we're going to survive, right? We hear like a crack of a twig and we turn around, we're looking for threats, right? We're kind of interacting with the environment. We're interacting with an environment that's right in front of us all the time. And, maybe there's like another reality, right? Storytelling, we're kind of imagining other environments, other realities. But let's talk about the reality of a social media experience or any sort of media experience. Okay. I opened something and now my brain is fixated on this news article. So now I'm being transported to Maryland, whatever, something happened in Maryland. So now my brain's like, oh, we're in Maryland. Okay. Ooh, that's kind of rough. What happened there? Now I turn a page and now I'm over in this like think piece on the state of whatever, right? And so now I'm over here. My reality and my brain is getting boom, 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 thrown into like all of these different places. And we know that, right, we are hooked into things more because of negative bias and because of our survival mechanisms that are threats to us, because we want to make sure that we are protected, right? We want to know about the threat. We want to know about the tiger. These news articles are tigers. These social media pieces are tigers. We are consuming these tigers, not really cognitively understanding that. And now it's in our bodies and now it's amping us up. And now what's my survival mechanism? Oh, control, boom, perfectionism. Okay. Now what do I need to do to like get myself okay? Now that's like amped up in my system, right?
Yeah, right.
So I'm a very caring person. So now I feel like, well, shoot, I want to fix all of this, but I feel like I can't. So I feel helpless. And when I feel helpless, I do not, right? So this is the thing that is happening in the background all the time, but we've normalized it because it's just, we're all doing it. And we're like, oh, well, it must be cool, right? It must be normal. But again, these conversations are finally happening. So yeah, thank you for letting me rewind that and bring it back.
Yeah. So it's all leading to the point where we click the button and say, here's $10,000, make me more masculine, or more feminine, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's like, I need to be more of something, or I need to be better at something.
Right. Because it's a perception. Let me just interrupt really quickly. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It's a perception that if I do that, I'm going to feel better. I'm going to feel safer. I'm going to belong, right? I'm going to satisfy these things that have been all kicked up in me, which I think is, again, when we are consciously marketing or putting our products out in the world and talking about how we're helping people, it's important that we see them without just like sticking the finger in the wound and like twisting it around. I think that's another thing that is worth us considering when we are talking about how we serve people or what we do.
So that is a wrap on season 1 of Your Own Best Company. When I first started this podcast, I was excited about the idea of creating something that was for people who love working alone. And what I found is that there are a lot of people who relate to that desire but don't work alone. And so what I found is that this podcast is reaching more than just the audience of people that I had intended it for. That all said, I'm grateful for everyone who listens to this podcast. Your time and your attention are extraordinarily valuable, and it means the world that you would share any of that with me. I am excited to see what's happening in the next season. In the first week of May, we're going to be coming back with a fresh new episode featuring my good friend Monique Eckes, who is a pet photographer. And in the last year, she has become a YouTuber to be reckoned with. So you're going to be hearing from her on the first Friday in May. Remember that there are coffee break podcasts all 6 days of the week other than Friday. And those are just an opportunity for me to share a little bit of what's on my mind. They're usually about 10 minutes or less. And again, it's just a way for me to get something out into the world that may or may not be meaningful, but I'm hopeful that it would be helpful to you. Thank you again for your time and your attention. And if you are looking for a new career direction, if you're looking for help with a creative project, or if you are looking for ideas, support, and strategy for marketing your solopreneur and freelance business, would you please remember that I'm also a coach in addition to being a podcaster. My coaching practice is always looking for creative people who are ready for the next thing in their lives, that next direction, that next project, and that next marketing strategy that's going to connect your work with the right people. Thank you again, and I will be back tomorrow with a coffee break. Thanks for listening to Your Own Best Company. If you enjoyed the show, would you do me a favor and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast host? If you really love it, leave me a review or share it with your circles. If you feel like your career is reaching a dead end, or you're feeling a deep sense of dissatisfaction in your work right now, I help people discover their gifts and then find or create new opportunities that are the best fit for their talent, experience, and lifestyle. Email me at coaching@franklintaggart.com for more information. I also help people start, finish, and launch creative projects, and I offer an ongoing marketing mastermind for solopreneurs and freelancers. More information on these programs and services can be found at franklintaggart.com. Thanks again for spending this time with me.